Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
This episode is brought to you by Unstoppable. Discover the inspiring true story about Anthony Robles, who defied every expectation to become a national wrestling champion in Unstoppable, a new original movie from Amazon MGM Studios and director William Goldenberg, evoking the excitement and camaraderie of classic sports dramas and thrilling wrestling matches. Unstoppable features an all-star ensemble cast, including Jarrell Jerome, Jennifer Lopez, Don Cheadle, Michael Pena, and Bobby Cannavale. Watch Unstoppable now, exclusively on Amazon Prime Video.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Hammer, an umpire podcast. I'm Kevin Weber. Like many of you, still self-quarantining and not umpiring any baseball games. So, as I mentioned before, I assign games for a big travel league with over 100 teams here in West Michigan. And we were trying to start our games as we did last year in late April. That was pushed to the second week of May. And then the government decided to do some, changes to the self-quarantine, open up some things not. And you can go play golf now, but they didn't say anything about playing baseball, which is not surprising. So now we're shooting for June 1st start. So maybe 1st of June, me and all of these other umpires here in West Michigan will get out on the field. Man, I'm hoping so, because as we keep rolling along, it looks like we don't know, man. I mean, we could not umpire at all this year. That would just be awful. I didn't think that would happen. I mean, it's been tough. It's been tough for everybody. So, but we're hanging in there, and hopefully things will work out. I know, like some of our local colleges or universities, that do some of the local tournaments, do quite a few. One of them, they're going to be closed through the summer, so there's not going to be any there. I don't know about the other ones in our area. So there's going to be less baseball to umpire for a lot of people, and we'll appreciate it once we're out there. Nonetheless, I have a show for you today. I've got some interesting things, a little bit longer show than the last couple weeks. I got a segment on revisiting the Federation Player DH rule, which a lot of us didn't get an opportunity to even use this year. Talking about a John Bible article that he had in Referee Magazine recently about brushing off the plate and the importance of that, and what that can do as far as your game management and dealing with players and things. So I got a little segment on that. And then, as always, I have a umpire spotlight, this time on Charlie Berry, who you might not know, but quite an interesting guy, not just as an umpire, Major League umpire, obviously, but in lots of other sports, and very successful in many things in his time on this planet. All right. So you can take a listen to that, and, tells a pretty good story. So thanks for tuning in once again for another episode of The Hammer, an umpire podcast. In the most recent issue of Referee Magazine, John Bible, who I featured in Umpire Spotlight recently, had an interesting little article about sweeping the plate off and brushing the plate, and how you handle that, which is something I think is a good little topic for some newer umpires or guys that maybe haven't really thought about it too much. So he talked about how in his 50 years of umpiring, he only had about 5 brushes. I think I've gone through 1 so far. I mean, they do get worn down a bit, so you got to get sometime, but not too often. And he liked to carry his brush in his shirt pocket instead of like his ball bag or his back pocket. And he figured that also gave him a little extra protection in case something hit there, because it's like right over your heart. I've tried that before. I always feel like it's a little loose there. I like to put my my little umpire booklet with the lineups and stuff in that front pocket if I get the opportunity to. I've tried to put my brush in my bag. I don't really like that. I usually put it in my back right pocket because I know where it is, and that's just what I do. Sometimes, though, your pocket comes out. You got to make sure you don't have your little, the inside of your pocket sticking out, like, that looks a little silly. So you got to watch that. And sometimes, in certain pants it works better than others. It can get stuck in there. But that seems to be where I put it. I'm not saying that's the best. That's just what I do. All right. So he talked about how he likes his catchers to kind of get a clue about his strike zone based on how he brushes off the plate early in the game, particularly after the initial warm-up pitches, where he gives like extra emphasis to brushing off the blacks of the plate. He might make a little comment, but he's not going to like tell people, his strike zone, because that's really not what we should be doing. But he wants to kind of send that subtle, understated message that, he's going to call the black and he's going to do what he can to get strikes. And hopefully catchers understand this, and early in the game, you get an opportunity to call those pitches either way, so that both teams are swinging, and the game will move along a little bit better. He says that sometimes he'll say something like, I like the black part of the plate to be really clean, just as a little hint, all right? Now, we know that sometimes ball players are pretty smart, and sometimes they're not, all right? I'm sure you've experienced that before. So if they don't get it, then there's not much you can really do about it. Now, it seems most of the time when we get people, or players that is, complaining about balls and strikes, it's frequently a hitter, all right? But we do get catchers from time to time that are ignorant of what they should be doing and start complaining about not getting strike calls. So obviously, you probably have seen this, and maybe some of you out there have done it. If it's a really, dire situation and needed, you can go around and brush off the plate, and you can kind of get face to face with the catcher, because that's usually where he's going to be standing, and you can say a few things that might need to be said about his conduct. That could be with him complaining about, balls and strikes. That could be with him pulling pitches and his poor glove work or whatever he might be trying to do, and get your point across. I think this should be used sparingly. It's not something that you want to be doing all the time. I think I've maybe only done it just a couple times here and there, handful of times over the years that I've been umpiring. Mr. Bible mentioned on a few occasions, he particularly would do this longer than needed, so that in some ways it was pretty obvious to everybody what he was doing. And, of course, you could get a coach getting all irritated with you about that, saying something to his player and all that, and come out and confront you about it. And if that happens, I suggest you do what John Bible says, and he says, hey, would you rather me warn him this way, or do you want me to, get in his face about it and make a bigger deal? And, if a coach is reasonably decent about things, he's going to say, okay, yeah, I understand. And it's probably at that point, it should be at that point, if you're doing this, fairly obvious to anybody paying attention in the game on either side or in the stands that this catcher is, going over the line of what his conduct should be. Anyway, some very good advice, some things to think about. Obviously, when you brush off the plate, your rear end should be facing the pitcher's mound. I see less experienced umpires sometimes be facing the wrong way. Looks silly. Don't do that. There's you can actually probably check out some videos and stuff. When you sweep out the plate, you straddle the plate, you brush it in a certain way. You probably develop a certain way to do it. You brush it with confidence. Okay, whatever way you want to do it, and you're not brushing it like it's a little fine piece of porcelain or something out there. Okay, you brush it off, you get it done, put the brush back in your pocket, you're ready to go. Boom, you're in control. Another thing he mentions, and this is definitely good for the newer umpires, do not take your brush out on the bases. Do not brush off the pitcher's plate. Do not brush off bases. All right? If somebody, I don't touch the bases when I'm out there. I mean, even if a base comes dislodged, I make players or the grounds crew, whoever is out there to take care of it. It's not my job to do that. All right. Plus, if I put the base back in and then something happens and somebody gets hurt and I didn't do, supposedly I didn't do it right, they could like try to blame it on me. It's not my responsibility. All right. And also, I try to keep my umpire uniform clean. I don't want to be out there, get my hands all dirty, and then you get your pants all dirty and everything else. So I don't like that. All right. So it looks pretty bush if you're brushing off the pitcher's plate or you're brushing off bases and things like that. If you need that, if there's a player there, say, hey, can you kick a little dirt away from there or something like that? I guess you could go over there and do it with your foot if it's really needed on like second base or first base and you feel like that might interfere with you making a call. But you should not be getting out of the brush. As far as pitchers, yeah, sometimes you can get a lot of dirt on the pitcher's plate, and it's nice to be able to knock some of that off. If it's really needed and you think a guy might be, it could be a balk or not based on whether or not he's on the rubber, then you might need to do that. Really, the only time I ever do that is if I want to say something to a pitcher about him very closely balking. Actually, he probably did balk and I didn't call it. Nobody really said anything, but I know that if he does it again, I'm going to call it. And this is usually in younger levels and I might be working, all right, or in the summer or something like that. But I'll, if the time is appropriate and it's like a good pause in the action or something, foul ball, something like that, I might go over there and kick off the pitcher's plate from dirt and under my breath, not looking in his eyes, say, you got to come to a stop, man. You're close to balking. You got to be coming to a stop for me. And then I kick off that and go back. And for all they know, I could be like, hey, man, this is just a little dirty out here. That's why I'm kicking off the plate. They don't know what I'm saying. And usually, they're like, oh, okay, thanks. Or they'll say, yeah, okay, I got you. Something like that. And then, then if he doesn't do it and I call that balk, it's like, dude, I told you. I gave you a shot. You didn't do it. He didn't come to a stop. And, I was being fair. So I don't want the coaches or players or anybody else to know that I'm going over there and mentioning that he's close to that. Obviously, in college games, higher level stuff, I'm not going to do that. But, there's certain games that we work that is a little bit more appropriate to do. And I suggest that maybe, you got to do it subtle. It's got to be real subtle, though, so that nobody thinks you're coaching players and telling them stuff. Because technically, if you see a balk, you got to call it. But, we all know there are some situations where it's just not the right thing to do as far as the flow of the game and the level that you're working. So you got to play it by ear, I guess, as you do it. So some interesting stuff there by John Bible. And that's in this newest episode, I guess, newest edition of Referee Magazine. So make sure you check that out. So maybe you were lucky enough to work some high school games this year before everything started getting canceled for the pandemic. I was not that lucky. I had a lot of them on my schedule, but not able to work any of them. Remember, of course, this year we had the player DH rule that was implemented. And I guess a lot of us, like me, are going to have to figure out that rule and make sure we keep studying up for it for next season, which hopefully goes well, right? So pretty much every high school umpire, you should now be at least a few weeks. You would have been a few weeks into the 2020 season, and you should have been, having some opportunities to witness the new player DH rule. But of course, that hasn't happened. It got lots of attention throughout the off season as people tried to come to grips with all the nuances and the ramifications. Amid all of those discussions that people were having, the National Federation in February came out with its baseball rules interpretations for 2020. And, some state associations may choose to adopt their own interpretations. Those issued by the Federation and are for, the high school interpretations. But two of the biggest areas of concern with the new player DH rule was the designations involving the use of courtesy runners for designated hitters who were also listed as either the pitcher or the catcher on the lineup card, and legal substitutions regarding the player DH. All right. So I decided to take a couple minutes here and review some of those. So let's say we have a play like this. The home team coach is using Jones, his starting pitcher, as the player DH. In the second inning, Jones comes to bat and hits a clean double. With Jones on second base, the coach goes to the plate umpire and requests that a courtesy runner run for Jones. All right, so this could be definitely a common thing that could have happened to us. What would be the ruling? So a courtesy runner for Jones, that's not allowed. When his team is on defense, Jones is a pitcher. When Jones is at bat, he is batting as a designated hitter, not as a pitcher. So a courtesy runner is not allowed for a designated hitter. You could pinch run for him, but then you would lose your DH, right? So this is the official Federation interpretation regarding the courtesy runner in relation to the new rule, which of course is 314B, right? More specifically, as stated in 314B2, the role of the designated hitter is terminated for the remainder of the game when the starting defensive player DH is substituted for either as a hitter or a runner. So, using that above scenario that I just mentioned here, the home team coach may use a substitute to pinch run for Jones, and due to the one-time reentry rule available for members of the starting lineup, re-enter Jones as both the pitcher and in his original spot in the batting order. However, Jones no longer retains the privileges of designated hitter, as that role has been eliminated for the remainder of the game. So now let's take a look at what happens when the substitutions become a bit more convoluted related to the player DH. So here's another play. Kelly is the left fielder, designated hitter. In the third inning, Jones substitutes for Kelly as the left fielder. In the fourth inning, Kelly returns as the left fielder. In the fifth inning, Armstrong substitutes for Kelly in left field. Here's my question. Can Kelly remain as the DH? The answer, no. Kelly, having been removed from the game twice, is no longer eligible to play in any capacity. And since Armstrong now must bat for himself, the role of the DH has ended. So the official Federation interpretation states that once Kelly is removed from the game, his defensive role, in his defensive role, a second time, he's no longer an eligible player, even though he has never left the lineup as a designated hitter. Right, so that doesn't really matter. Because a substitute must now bat in the spot that was previously occupied by a designated hitter, as stated in 314B2, the role of the designated hitter is terminated for the remainder of the game. So they have all these rule interpretations. If you still haven't looked at them on the Federation Baseball Rules interpretation website, you can look those up pretty easily and see, and make sure that, hey, man, we also be experts at this by the time we finally get to do some high school games next year. This episode's Umpire Spotlight is going to be Charlie Berry. Charlie Berry had one of the most extraordinary sports careers of the 20th century. He was a two-sport athlete who plied his craft as a player and official for more than 40 years. He was a National Football League end, a Major League Baseball catcher, a college football coach, a minor league baseball manager, an NFL head linesman, and a Major League Baseball umpire. Quite amazing. These dual sports put Berry in contact with the greatest sportsmen of his time, and he earned the respect of everyone he met. Mr. Berry was born in 1902 in Pennsylvania, but when he was young, his family moved to New Jersey, and he grew up in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. When he was just a kid, just old enough to even hold a glove, he got a baseball glove, and he inherited his father's love for sports and his athletic skills. His dad was a good ball player in his day. At Phillipsburg High School, he made the varsity team in football, basketball, and baseball, and he received 11 varsity letters in his 4 years there. As a sophomore, he helped lead the football team to the New Jersey Championship, where when he was a senior, he was elected captain of the football, basketball, and baseball teams. A local newspaper article declared Berry the greatest athlete that ever wore a garnet and gray uniform. In the summers, he worked at a local foundry, and after hours played catcher and outfield for the company baseball team in his area in the Industrial League. Barry played college athletics. He was recruited, I guess, by several Eastern colleges, and he decided to go to Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. And as a freshman, he was the starting left end on the football team and proved to be an excellent receiver. He also played defensive end, common at that time, right? The 1921 team that he was on was undefeated and outscored its opponents 239-26 and won a consensus national championship. In the spring of 1922, Barry joined the baseball team and earned the starting catcher job and helped the team to a 14-8 record. So, an excellent athlete in both sports. In his senior year, Barry was elected class president and named captain of both the football and baseball teams. And in January 1925, Walter Camp named Barry to his 1924 All-American football team as a first-string left end. After graduating in June 1925 with a degree in economics, he was signed to a contract by the Philadelphia Athletics by their scout Mike Drennan, and he reported immediately to Hall of Famer Connie Mack's Athletics and made his major league debut against the Cleveland Indians in June 1925. In the end, he only played about 10 games for the Athletics in 25, and he was soon to find glory with the Pottsville, that's in Pennsylvania, Maroons of the very new and fledgling National Football League. So the Maroons were a collection of all-stars, and Barry, despite never having played down of professional football and being the youngest member of the team, was named the team captain, and he more than proved himself as a leader and a player. Against the Green Bay Packers, he scored 3 touchdowns and 4 extra points and kicked a field goal. He led the NFL in scoring, and Pottstown won the 1925 league championship. But the NFL stripped the Maroons of the title for playing an unauthorized game against Notre Dame featuring the Four Horsemen. So if you look at your NFL records, there you go. Following season, the Athletics optioned Barry to the Portland Beavers of the Pacific Coast League, and he played some minor league ball. He got married, and unfortunately, during the season, he suffered the first serious injury of his career. He broke his wrist. So he recovered before the end of the season, but he did play 99 games. He went to the NFL back with the Maroons, who won 10 games and lost 2, and they finished in third. And that was his last stint as a professional football player. So the Athletics had some doubts about his wrist, and he was optioned out to the Texas League and hit .330 and did well down there. When baseball was over for the season, he took a job as the head football coach at Grover City College in western Pennsylvania, and he returned to the Wolverines each year through the 1931 season, compiling a 5-year record of 27 wins and 7 losses and 8 ties. And they won the Tri-Conference title in 3 of those years. So he was a heck of a football coach as well. The rights to Barry's baseball contract were sold to the Boston Red Sox, and he proved a pretty dependable backup catcher, playing about 80 games in the late 20s there. His best season was 1931. He appeared in his most games, 111. He hit .283, had his most at-bats, his most hits, his most runs scored of his career. And the season was memorable for a play involving Barry on April 22nd when Babe Ruth tried to score after a fly out to center field. Catcher, Barry, the former football player, put a shoulder into the Yankee star and threw him skyward, and Ruth came down in a heap, safe at home plate. Ruth took his position in left field in the bottom of the inning, but his left leg gave way and he collapsed, and Ruth was carried from the field by his teammates and was taken to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a severe Charlie horse in his left thigh from the shoulder, I'm sure, of Barry into it. Ruth, unable to return to action for 2 weeks, did not blame Barry, saying it's all part of the game, and that was what he was paid to do. I'd have done the same thing in his place, Baseball isn't ladies ping pong. It's a game played by men who want to win. Obviously, different rules now. You can't be plowing over guys, right? Barry bounced around in the big leagues. He was traded to the White Sox and had some good moments there. Eventually, he made his way back with a contract with the Athletics and played there into 1935 and 36. But in the middle of 1936 season in June, he was released by the Athletics as a player, and he was hired as a coach. And he remained in that position through the first half of the 1940 season. So, college football coach and also Major League Baseball coach. Barry not only helped the catchers for the Athletics, but he also instructed the pitchers. And during spring training, he would hold regular classes with the pitching staff. Barry had one last hurrah as a player. On September 8, 1938, he replaced Hale Wagner at catcher and made 2 plate appearances, going 0 for 2. In 1939, Barry was ejected from a game twice. His only ejections as a coach. He was ejected a few times as a player and gotten some, rhubarbs with some umpires. George Moriarty being one of them that I've mentioned on the show before. Anyway, on July 15th, Bill Summers tossed Barry for arguing a call at third base, and on August 6th, Harry Geisel gave him the thumb for protesting a home run call. And then in 1940, Connie Mack asked Barry to take over as manager of the A's farm team, the Wilmington, Delaware Blue Rocks of the Interstate League. And he took over the team in a 28 and 29 team and piloted them to a 68 and 52 record, which was good enough for second place in the league. So, good football coach and obviously a good baseball coach as well. During this time, he still remained involved with football. He started to officiate high school and college football games. And then in January 1941, he was hired by the National Football League as a head linesman for the coming season. At about the same time, he resigned as manager of the minor league team and became an umpire in the Eastern League. So NFL linesman and minor league umpire. He had worked only a few spring training games when the International League saw Barry work and purchased his contract. Barry explaining his switch to officiating, he said, "I found out that umpires win every argument, so I decided to go over to their side." So he quickly rose through the ranks of the minor leagues and also in the National Football League. He was the head linesman for the 1942 NFL Championship game in only his second season. And then he was the head linesman in 11 more NFL Championship games before his career was over. In baseball, he spent less than 2 seasons in the International League before being hired to umpire in the American League. Made his Major League umpiring debut September 10th, 1942 in Chicago in a doubleheader between the Senators and the White Sox. Working in a 3-man crew with Bill Summers and Art Passarella, Barry covered third base, then moved to first base in the nightcap. Although he umpired in only 7 games that September, he had proven himself. For the next 20 years, he was a full-time Major League umpire. In his second full year as a Major League umpire, Barry umpired the 1944 All-Star Game, worked the bases starting in the first, and then moved to second base in the fifth. I guess they switched them around back then. It was the first of 5 All-Star games that he would umpire, the others being 1948, 52, 56, and the second All-Star game in 1959. Sometimes they would play 2 back in the day. In 1945, he joined the U.S. Army Special Services and made a goodwill trip to Greenland and Iceland to entertain the troops stationed there and to give clinics on officiating. After the war, he continued to make trips, on behalf of the U.S. military. In the 50s and early 60s, he made 4 trips to Germany and then 3 trips to Japan. Barry umpired 4 no-hitters and was at a different base for each one. He was at first base for Bo Belinsky's no-hitter in 1962, second base for Allie Reynolds' second no-hitter in 1951, and third base for Jack Kralick's gem in 1962, and he was at home plate for Bob Feller's third and last no-hitter in 1951. He was almost part of a perfect game. On July 27, 1958, Billy Pierce of the White Sox had one going with 2 outs in the ninth before the Senators' Ed Fitzgerald lined a ball down the first baseline. Barry, umpiring at first, called it fair, and the perfect game was gone. He took time off from umpiring to serve as head linesman of the 1949 College All-Star Game at Chicago's Soldier Field, which featured the best college football players against the previous year's NFL champions. So that's interesting. That'd be interesting to do nowadays, right? That left a 3-man umpiring crew for the White Sox-Indians game, and when Cleveland lost on a disputed play, Bill Veeck, owner of the Indians, protested the game on the grounds that Barry should have been at the game. The president disallowed the protest, not surprisingly, right? And Barry also worked the 1951 College All-Star Game after working both games of a doubleheader between the Indians and the White Sox. During his 21 years as a Major League umpire, Barry ejected 55 players. His ejections range from 8 in 1956 to none in 1945 and 1959. He sent 4 future Hall of Famers packing. Casey Stengel, Lou Boudreau, who he ejected 3 times, his old White Sox battery mate Ted Lyons, and Al Lopez. Lopez was Barry's last career ejection. Manager Paul Richards was thumbed by Barry the most times, 4, and the most men Barry ejected during one game was 3, and he did that twice in 1952 and 62. He umpired in 5 World Series, 1946, 50, 54, 58, and 62. In 1958, Barry was the head linesman for the NFL title game, becoming the only man to officiate both major championships in the same year. Can you imagine that nowadays? Being the white hat for the Super Bowl and maybe get the plate or something on Game 7 of the World Series. That'd be quite amazing. The 1962 World Series was Barry's swan song. In December of 62, after 21 years of wearing the blue suit, he called it quits. He'd appeared in 3,079 regular season games, 29 World Series games, 5 All-Star games, as well as countless spring training and exhibition games. He retired as one of the most respected umpires in the game. In 1960 and 61, the Sporting News conducted a poll of writers, managers, and coaches to evaluate the Major League umpires. In both polls, Barry was named the #1 American League umpire. He went to work for the American League as an assistant to the supervisor of umpires, and he did some scouting of umpires and inspected field conditions, at the ballparks. He also worked for the National Football League, observing and evaluating officials, and twice he traveled to Mexico to give clinics on umpiring for Major League Baseball. He also gave officiating clinics in the Pennsylvania area. He kept busy on the banquet circuit. His gift of gab and storytelling abilities made him very sought-after guest speaker. He also participated as an umpire in a few of the old-timer games, and he kept his hand in umpiring by twice calling plays at the NCAA College World Series. So, yeah, he's got that too. Okay. So, I guess he didn't, referee or was a referee in Stanley Cup or something, or, in the NBA championship. In the fall of 1970, just before the league championship series, Major League umpires went on strike, demanding more pay for postseason assignments. And for the American League Championship Series between the Orioles and Twins, the league office put together a replacement umpiring crew consisting of 2 minor league umpires and 2 retired umpires. We had John Stevens and Barry. And then for the retired guys, on October 3rd, Barry traveled to Minnesota, and in his last Major League umpiring assignment, he took his position at third base. At the age of 67 and 350 days, he was the second oldest umpire ever to appear in a box score. The record lasted until 2007, when Bruce Fleming moved into second spot and Barry moved to third. The strike ended the next day, and Barry returned to his normal life. So that was it. I'm sure he thought that was pretty exciting. Through the years, Barry received many honors. received 1 vote in 1955 and 3 votes in 58 for induction in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, which I still think he should definitely be considered. In 1966, the Eastern Pennsylvania chapter of Pennsylvania Intercollegiate Athletic Association recognized him for his contribution to football officiating. And also in 66, he was inducted into the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. His alma mater honored him in 1977, inducting him into their Hall of Fame. And in 2000, he was named him as their college's greatest athlete of the 20th century. In 1980, Barry was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, so very impressive there too. In interviews, he'd often explain what makes a good official and the keys to his success on the field. He wrote, "With me, studying and reading the rules is a daily routine. I would feel I wasn't doing my job if I didn't look at the rule book every day. Once you get the wording, you get the feeling you're never in doubt. I feel that an umpire should know the rules so well that he could recite every rule in the rule book word for word." Talking about the on-the-field necessities, he explained, "The main thing to remember are these. You must know the rules, you must know where you should be on the field, and you must be there to call the play." And then he added, "One qualification for a good sports official is that he does not call plays too quickly. Instead of anticipating the play, let it happen. Follow it intently to its completion and then make the call quickly. I think that's a rule which can be followed in all ways of life." I definitely agree. So anyway, summarizing his career, this is what he said about it. He says, "I got just as much kick out of officiating as I did out of playing. It was never an effort, never a burden." He also said, "I think I'm a lucky guy. I like my job. The pay is good, and I wouldn't change places with any man." And I think those of us that have gotten this officiating bug, whether it be umpiring in other sports or other sports, I think we would all agree with that, right? Anyway, in June 1972, Barry suffered a stroke at his home in New Jersey, and then in late July, he was transferred to the hospital in Evanston, Illinois, to be near his oldest daughter. After an operation and subsequent physical therapy, he suffered a massive heart attack and died in September 1972, and he was buried back in his home area in New Jersey and survived by his wife and his 3 daughters. In December 1958, the New York Giants and the Baltimore Colts met in the NFC Championship game. It had been called the greatest game ever played. And late in the fourth quarter, the Giants had the ball, and if they could get a first down, they could run out the clock and win the game. And they gave the ball to Frank Gifford, who charged into the line. After the play, Barry, the head linesman, spotted the ball short of the first down, and the Giants had to turn the ball over. And the Colts ended up tying the game and went on to win it in overtime. Barry's call drew protests from the Giants and was second-guessed for years afterward. But in 2008, on the 50th anniversary of the momentous game, ESPN produced a 2-hour documentary about it, and they examined the disputed play, and through forensics analysis of and photographs and film, determined that Barry's decision was indeed correct. But of course, Charlie knew that. I'm sure he knew that right when he made the call. Anyway, an extremely interesting man, and that's our umpire spotlight this week, Charlie Barry. Thanks once again for listening to this episode of the Hammer and Umpire podcast. I've been trying to be as consistent as possible and get one episode out each week for you. Well, hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have some opportunities to umpire and have some things happen to us that I can bring to the show. But as of right now, we're just in limbo. That's just kind of the world that we're living in right now, unfortunately. They added some new analytics to the podcast platform that I use at Anchor, and I thought you might find it interesting, like the demographics as far as the ages of people that listen to the show. Not surprisingly, we only have 4% that are 17 and under people that listen. But hey, that's actually a little bit better than I thought it would be. 18 to 22-year-olds, we got 2%. 23 to 27-year-olds, 2%. 28 to 34-year-olds, 11%. So, as we all know, we need to get the younger crowd involved in officiating all sports, definitely in umpiring. We all can work on that. Maybe see what we can do as far as when the season actually gets going. But my biggest group is the 45 to 59, and that is the age of most umpires. 32% of my listeners are in that age bracket. 35 to 44, we got 23%, so that's not too bad. And then the 60-plus folks out there, 20%. All right? So, kind of what I would expect, I guess, and showing that we got to do our recruiting and make sure that we're getting new blood in here so that when we're all old and out of shape and our bones are giving us trouble, that we have some umpires. Speaking of that, are you keeping in shape? It's tough with the self-quarantine stuff. People are putting on weight. I'm sure I put on some pounds here myself, even though I walk pretty much at least once a day, usually multiple times if the weather's good. And I try to do some stretching and things. But with everything closed down here in Michigan, like it is in lots of states, I can't go to the YMCA to do my stretching and stuff. And just the general idea that you're more stuck in your house, you're sitting around more than you normally would be, makes it difficult. So I've noticed that I've been a little more stiff and everything lately, and I've been trying to work on that so that hopefully in June here, when things maybe start opening back up, I can get back out on the field and not hurt myself, right? Or be too sore once I work my first plate, which I hope to do. I know there's always some of those plate dodgers out there, right? The guys that don't like to do the plate. But I know I try not to be a plate dodger if possible. And I know I won't be dodging a plate. I'd like to get out there and get behind a plate and call some balls and strikes. I mean, the first game I work, I want to do it. Maybe the first few, who knows? So I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be loud and proud when I get out there with my strike 3 call. If somebody's standing there, I'm going to get all the strikes I can, right? So hang in there, guys. Let me know if you have any feedback for me. Email me at spawnoffusion06@yahoo.com. You can tweet me at Kevin R. Weber. Find me on Facebook under the Hammer, the podcast Facebook page, and leave a voicemail through the Anchor app. You got to favorite the show and stuff. And you can leave a little voicemail, 60 seconds or less, about whatever, and I'd love to use it on the show and talk about whatever. Maybe you have a scenario you want to have me look at and tell you what I think and whatever. That'd be great, as I've done earlier. And just you got to just be ready. I know we can only look at the rule book so much, but make sure you got things down, your mechanics down. Now the weather's getting better, so if you need to go to a ball field where there's probably nobody there, you can work through things on a ball field if you want to, or take an umpire friend with you and do such things and see what you can do, with proper social distancing, of course, right, and everything that we're supposed to be following out there. So until next time, keep calling strikes.